Alright good people, let's talk about the craziest desktop GPU ever, the RTX 5090. I know this beauty right here has been out for a while, and by now you all know what this absolute monster of a GPU is capable of. But I've been using it for all of our video production and quite a few hours of gaming since our initial review, so I still wanted to share my experience with you. The launch also was not without its fair share of problems for Team Green, and I know that I am very privileged to be able to test these cards, while so many of you guys have problems even getting one, and with prices that are heavily inflated right now. But it seems like the situation for both the 5090 and its smaller siblings is slowly starting to relax, so I have my fingers crossed for anyone out there trying to get a new GPU. And while we are on the subject of new GPUs, I would love to know your plans for 2025. Are you planning to upgrade? What GPU is in your sights and what are you using right now? Please sound off in the comments below. Before we get finally into it, I wanted to share my perspective on testing and experiencing these cards. I'm a notebook guy, and it's been a very long while since I have been driving a desktop system daily. And actually, the fastest card I personally own is a 2080 Ti, and the last desktop GPU review I did was with a 4080 and AMD 7900 XTX almost 2 years ago. So please keep that in mind when I talk about potential performance gains and of course when it comes to value and everything. Since there is still a tremendous difference between laptops and desktops, especially when talking about the 5090. I will mostly use our measurements from the website team that tested Nvidia's new flagship in combination with AMD's 9800X3D. I also did some additional testing with my review system, and we have been able to test almost the full stack of the new Nvidia cards, meaning the 5070, 5070 Ti and of course the 5080. So I will also throw in those numbers to give you the bigger picture. And since there's actually also some competition going on, especially in the mid-range segment of the market in the form of AMD's 9070 and 9070 XT, you will get those numbers as well. I already made a video about my test system, so just let me give you a quick recap. We are talking mostly pro-out components, most notably the case, motherboard and AIO, which keeps our Core Ultra 9 285K quite well under control with barely any perceivable fan noise. And I was actually quite curious how the Founders Edition with its insanely advanced cooling system or something like the Zotac 5090 Solid would fit into this, and how much they would affect thermals and noise, considering they chuck back about 580 watts under full load, and that heat has to go somewhere. And well, yes, the back of the case is the perfect solution for cold winter editing marathons, but when it comes to noise, this system is simply insane. I have the case and AIO fans run on silent, since I would rather have the CPU run a little hotter or a little bit slower than have to deal with a louder system. And introducing the 5090s into the mix basically changed absolutely nothing. This puppy can render one of our videos or run Alan Wake 2 in 4K with path tracing, and the server under my desk is still louder than this absolute monster. But do not take my word for it, and please enjoy some noise samples just to give you a more subjective impression. And I mentioned it before, in addition to the Founders Edition 5090, I was also able to spend some time with Zotac's Solid variant, with its simply massive but still quite sexy looking cooler design. With that out of the way, let's quickly put the 5090's performance into perspective before we get to my personal gaming and work experience. As I have already mentioned, we had the chance to test almost all of the already released RTX 5000 cards and what AMD has on offer in terms of competition. So let's kick things off with everybody's darling when it comes to GPU benchmarks. In 3D Mark's Firestrike, the differences in the CPUs we have been using in our test benches becomes very apparent, so please take that into consideration, especially when looking at the mid-range, which reveals some surprises, especially when it comes to the placement of AMD's 9070s, which seem to benefit quite a bit from the 9800X3D. The 5090s, however, play a completely different game and have an impressive lead over whatever else passes as a GPU these days. My system also seems to have taken quite a hit from the Core Ultra 9 and my rather conservative settings, and I am curious to see how this will translate into gaming performance. TimeSpy pretty much tells the same story, and once again the 9800 X3D looks like the perfect pairing for whatever graphics card you want to get in 2025. My ProArt system also keeps up nicely, but once again there is definitely a bit of a performance hit compared to our official lab test bench. If you are into any form of CGI workloads, you will probably already have your sights on one of these puppies. If you haven't, our Blender tests show very impressively why you should. While the time difference for a single rendered image might not seem like much if you have to render multiple frames or scale it up to a more render-intensive situation and add in the massive amount of video memory you have at your disposal, the 5090 might be a no-brainer. Alright, let's talk video games. I will actually just give you a few examples since this is again more of a personal experience video. And we already have all the data with countless games in different settings and resolutions on the website, so please just use this as a general overview. Checking render performance in Cyberpunk, your choice of CPU will have a huge impact on your experience, especially once again in Full HD. The Core Ultra here really won't give you everything the 5090 is capable of, but I would assume that if you can afford one of these bad boys, you will hardly only play in Full HD. The lineup in QHD is starting to make much more sense, and 4K shows very impressively why you would want a 5090 in the first place. But what about your actual experience, or in this case, well, mine. Since I wanted to experience the 5090 with everything it can do, I also got my hands on a new screen for this video, and Alienware sent over their 32-inch curved OLED, refreshing at a pretty impressive 240Hz. And since Nvidia claimed that's what we can actually drive, well, let's put their claims to the test. To get to those numbers, you will have to say goodbye to native rendering, which I'm actually quite okay with since I personally have no problems utilizing both DLSS and frame generation. I think upscaling has come a very long way since we first saw it a few years ago, and especially with Nvidia's new transformer model, using DLSS often looks better than a native image. But when we are talking about fully path-traced games, upscaling is simply not enough, and you would also have to utilize frame generation, at least if you want to get the highest FPS possible. I know there was a lot of controversy around the whole topic, and my take is that it's an optional feature. You can use it, but you do not have to, and with all things in life, it's a compromise. Yes, there are some visual disadvantages when it comes to image quality, but those vary heavily by game, and personally, I really have to look for them to notice them. And it rarely ever distracted me from my overall gaming experience. And when it comes to input lag or latency in general, again, it's a very subjective thing. But since we mostly talk about path tracing and therefore frame generation in slower, more story-focused games, I would mostly play with a controller anyways. It's never been an issue for me. But of course, your mileage will vary here, depending on how sensitive you are to such things. So long story short, Cyberpunk in all of its path-traced glory with DLSS in quality, 4x frame generation and utilizing the new transformer model netted me a little over 200 FPS, around 60 with just using DLSS and a mere 30-ish rendering everything natively. I would have to say that personally, I do not really feel the impact of using frame generation, even when playing this with mouse and keyboard, and I'm gladly taking the much smoother experience. If anything, without frame generation, when you are moving very quickly, the image might be a tad bit clearer, but then again, you simply feel the missing frames here a lot as well. So I guess it's the good old game of pick your poison. And guys, you also have to keep in mind what we are getting here. We are talking full path tracing, and this game looks simply amazing. The same story continues with Alan Wake 2, for example, and since I did not just want to replay our benchmark scene, I actually started the Lake House Story DLC to really play the game for a few hours. Again, I simply cranked all the settings, including path tracing, and enjoyed the game at over 200 FPS in 4K. And not once did I feel distracted or less immersed by things like latency or input lag. And with the Alienware's HDR capabilities, well, it's been pure eye candy. But what about games that are not yet upgraded or simply do not offer support for DLSS 4 and MFG? Well, Nvidia lets you override the game-specific DLSS settings in the Nvidia app, which I have tried for Assassin's Creed Shadows during my testing for Ubisoft's latest adventure. We also have a full video for that, so please feel free to check it out after this one. So you can easily use the new transformer model for improved visuals and MFG for some extra frames. I know I sound like a broken record, but personally I would not hesitate to enjoy the game with these settings. I know the problem with these features is that they are hidden behind a pretty significant paywall right now, especially with the insane prices you will have to shell out for the 50 series cards. But I would still urge you guys to try it out and make up your own mind. If on the other hand you do own a 40 or 50 series cards, please let me know what you think about DLSS and especially about frame generation. Do you use it? Does your experience match mine, or do you have problems with it? I would really like to know, so again, sound off below. Alright, that's gaming, but what about work? I know not every one of you is a creator, and content creation can be a lot of things these days. But since I spend most of my time in Resolve, well, it's what I can talk about. Simply put, it's been an amazing and flawless experience. Resolve, for example, in combination with our RAW footage, eats video memory for breakfast, and if you fill it up, playback gets quite stuttery and you would have to restart the application. Well, I never had to do this with the 5090, and I've never seen more than around 21 gigs of memory usage, so it's great to have that sort of headroom. Everything else was smooth sailing too, be it transcribing our A-roll, applying our color grades, or general editing. And when it comes to export times, I mean, I do not really care how long it takes to render a video I spend a few hours editing, but seeing a 10-minute video being rendered in less than 2 minutes, it's pretty crazy, I have to admit. And that pretty much sums it up when it comes to the desktop 5090. Yes, it's an insanely expensive piece of tech, and I would actually love to know if there are people out there spending that much cash on this kind of GPU just for gaming. I mean, you do get the best experience money can buy, especially if you pair it with an equally bonkers monitor like the Alienware I was using, or pretty much any of the relatively new 4K 240Hz OLEDs. But I would say this card makes more sense if you use it for work as well, be it as a video creator, editor, CGI artist, pretty much everything with AI, and in general everything that needs an insane amount of compute grunt. Since I would say even with the inflated prices right now, the time you save makes the card pay for itself rather quickly. Circling back to my test system, I am still blown away by how quiet that much performance can be, since fan noise is pretty much a constant when you're living in the laptop world. Sure, the Core Ultra is apparently not the best pairing if you want to get the most out of your shiny new graphics card, but apart from our benchmark results, I also did not really felt held back by the Intel CPU. I was still able to play everything I wanted in 4K without any problems, whether it was super advanced games or more competitive titles. And since most of my work is GPU dependent anyway, I had no issues here as well. So yeah, that's been my experience with Nvidia's latest flagship. Once again, this was a rather personal take, so please take it as such. I know that there's a lot of very understandable frustration going around because of prices and availability. But I would still love to hear your opinion on all of this. Please just keep it civilized and let's have a constructive conversation in the comments below. This should also be it for today. Thanks a ton for watching, please leave a like and sub on your way out, and again, feel free to check out some of our other videos or head on over to our website for all of our latest desktop GPU reviews. My name is Alex, you have been fantastic, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. Take care.